Hi, everyone. I'm Hilary. I work at the CSU Poetry Center. Thank you so much for joining us for this launch of No One Knows Their Blood Type. It's wonderful to see all these familiar names popping in. I'm going to slowly get us started. And I have just some logistics and some thanks, and then an introduction to Maya, the author of this beautiful novel, and to Hazem, its translator. This book was published by the CSU Poetry Center. For those of you who are in the waiting room, I think that there was a picture of the Poetry Center there, so you got to glimpse our bookshelves in Cleveland. Today, we're going to hear from Maya and from Hazem, and then we're going to hear from a wonderful array of guest speakers who will join us to share some warm thoughts about this novel and what has moved them about it. And then at the end, I think there should be a little time for a Q&A. And if we run out of time, you can always reach us at the same email that you got all the Zoom links from, poetrycenter@csuohio.edu. We love to hear from people and we love email. So don't hesitate to be in touch. For our guest speakers, feel free to turn your video off when you're not talking, if you don't want to, be on screen, whatever you would like to do. I'll send an email after the webinar with links to the book in the US. You can order from us in Cleveland. And if you're on the other side of the Atlantic, you can order from Maqam Books. And thank you to Hazem and to Masoud at Maqam for making that happen. I also want to thank the team at the CSU Poetry Center who has helped to make this book, which is Carol and Zach and Joey and Kristen and Ari and a few of our former students who graduated but were part of this book coming into life, Marlo and John. And also to Ohio State University Press, who are our new distributors after we lost our old distributors this year. So I'll briefly talk about Maya and Hazem. Maya Abdelhadi is a Arabic language Palestinian novelist, poet, and children's book author. And I know many of you on this call know her book, You Can Be the Last Leaf, which came out in English from Milkweed in 2022, translated by Fadi Judah. And I also want to thank Fadi for originally kind of, I think, putting us all in touch and getting this book kind of started. That kind of behind the scenes work that's so essential. And Maya also edited the book of Ramallah, an anthology of short stories published by Kama in 2021. And her children's book, The Blue Pond of Questions, is also out in English. And she has other work out in Arabic, which I incite this room also to find and translate. Hazem Jamjoum is a cultural historian who works as an audio curator and preservation archivist in London. He's an editor with the recently established Maqam Editions, and congratulations on the new press. And his translation of Ghassan Kanafani's The Revolution of 1936 to 1939 in Palestine is out with Kama Press, 1804 Press. And this novel is his first literary translation, which is very exciting. I'll just say a few little words about the book and then hand it off to the many beautiful presences on this call. So the CSU Poetry Center is a small press. We publish 2 to 5 books a year of poetry and essays and translations. And we signed this novel, I think it was back in fall 2021, if I remember right. It was a little while ago. And it's not so unusual, for a small press that we publish a book 2 or 3 or 4 years later. That in itself is fairly common. But I myself, maybe naively, didn't foresee or have a way to imagine the darkness of this past year, and that this book's release and all of our work now would be occurring amid an ongoing genocide, an escalating genocide in Palestine and Lebanon, and in resistance to it. Because the form my work takes is in writing in books and language and teaching, and some students are here. Thank you for joining. I'll say a little bit about this book and how it has moved me and how we're so honored to be part of its life in English here at the Poetry Center. I remember when I first read this this manuscript back in 2021, I was so struck by how funny and perceptive and sly and feminist and hot it was as a novel, and how this writer had managed to do what to me is the hardest and best thing that a novel can do, which is to have this really, to perform this really radical thinking as if casually, you know, as if it was offhand. And for those of you who haven't read it yet, I really recommend Hazem's afterword, the translator's afterword in the back of the novel, which I think puts that radical thinking into language very efficiently, and expresses kind of how much this novel is offering. This book, it moves sort of very fluidly from the intensities of girlhood and sisterhood and marriage, mortality, kind of 3 decades of history in Palestine, in the PLO, alongside the kind of like everyday almost impossibility of being a mom, of having a mom, and living in the shadow of the patriarch, kind of in both private and public life, and kind of how to live in that shadow, how to thrive in it. And when I was thinking about this novel, I got stuck on that phrase, kind of the shadow of the patriarch, which I felt, and I was thinking like, you know, we use that word shadow to evoke fearfulness and coldness and darkness and obstruction from the light. But also when you're a kid, a shadow is a kind of a funny thing. It's something you play with. It's like this clown that's attached to you. And I was enjoying thinking of the patriarch that way, this kind of clown that's attached to you. And I was also thinking, and this is maybe particularly for readers in Northeast Ohio, that, you know, when I think about a shadow here, I often think of those, you know, being outside in the yard and finding those little wild strawberries that are often in the shadow of a tree or a bush or right under the ground cover. And I liked thinking about that as a way of speaking of what this novel offers, this small, real, vivid, tart beauty that's sort of living and thriving and creating its own possibility in that patriarchal shadow. And I know others are going to talk about their experience of this book, it's such a rich work that there will be many, many angles to speak of, but I thought I'd offer first just those wild strawberries, and as a first offering toward this novel. And now I'd love to hand it off to Maya and to Hazem to read a little bit of this work for us. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm so moved to hear your words, Hilary. It's the first time I see you and the first time I hear your opinion on the book. I'm so glad and moved to hear that. And thanks to Hazem, yani, we had like this love story about the novel like 10 years ago, and now more than 10 years. It has been 10 years, I think, and now we finally like made it in a very bad timing, I think, but I think it's also in a necessary timing. Unfortunately, like we are dealing with this book and celebrating this book, and now people in Gaza are dying and killed by the Israeli army in purpose, and lots of my friends are like burned right now in Jabalia camps, and it's very strange to move on and to do our daily life and daily action and daily things during what is happening. But at the same time, I feel like we should do that because it's like what they want us to feel, that we don't deserve to do these small things and to do these usual things that we do, and we all have to be eliminated and disappeared and scared and under the rubble. And this is what should be all the Palestinians should have their lives, and but I think we should be loud and talk about love and hope. I hate romanticizing the Palestinian or anything about what is happening. It's brutality, it's killing, it's it's the worst thing that ever happened in the humanity, I think. But I think also we need to talk about this through literature, because literature is different, and art saved me, and I think it can save the new generation and maybe the other generations, because this will never end until it ends in some point. I will read part of the novel in Arabic because there's also speakers in Arabic here, and Hazem will read it in English. أول ما تحمله ذاكرتي من صور يعود لأيام أخرى مختلفة تماماً. أيامها كنت أنام على الكنبة في غرفة الجلوس التي تفتح فتصبح سريرنا الخاص أنا ويارا، وأنا أتلصص لأرى من ثقب الغطاء الذي يتوسع كل يوم بفعل أصابعي مسلسل رأفت الهجان المعروض على القناة الأردنية، وأتلقى فردة حذاء عمتي على رأسي فأشيح برأسي إلى الجهة الأخرى وأكمل تقشير الطلاء عن الجدار، وأجاهد لأبعد قدم يارا النائمة على الجهة المعاكسة من الكنبة والتي تضرب أسفل بطني بقصد أو بدونه. لم أعرف يوما أن أنام وأنا جائعة، ولم أستطع أن أطلب أكثر مما تمنحه عمتي من طعام، وهو غالبا ربع رغيف وحبة بندورة. هذا في حال قررت أنني جائعة، وهي في العادة تعتقد أنني لست كذلك. في تلك الأوقات كان أبي عبارة عن صوت يأتي من إسبانيا عن طريق الهاتف، يتصل كل شهر تقريبا فيقلب جو البيت، وإن تأخر اتصاله تتحول عمتي إلى حالة مزاجية غير محتملة، وتأخذنا بعد عدة أيام إلى مكاتب تابعة لمنظمة التحرير في جبل الحسين، فنركب السرفيس وتضعني على حجرها كي لا تضطر لدفع أجرتي، وغالبا ما تحدث مشكلة مع السائق على 8 قروش التي يطالبها بدفعها عن يارا، فنكمل الطريق مشيا وهي تلعن أبانا والسائق وكل شيء. نصل مكتب المنظمة فيسألها الرجل الأصلع الذي يقف على الباب: شو ما اتصل أبو السعيد؟ فتعيد عليه حكاية كل مرة، ثم تسأل عن رجل اسمه أبو الهول الذي لا تجده في العادة، فتجرنا خلفها إلى مكتب رجل آخر يدعى أبو العينين، رجل أسمر طويل ورأسه مليء بالشعر الشائب. يستقبلنا أبو العينين بحفاوة شديدة ويخبرنا كل مرة أنه صديق أبي من أيام بيروت، ويعرف أمي ويعرفنا حين كنا نسكن في الحمرة، ثم يقوم بتذكير يارا بالأيام التي كان يأخذها بها إلى روضة الوردية بالسيارة، وكيف كانت تصرخ لأنها لا تريد الذهاب إلى الروضة. لا تتحمل عمتي هذه القصص فتقاطعه لتسرد القصة نفسها التي تسردها على كل من تراه لأول مرة أو للمرة 100. هذه وتشير إلي ربيتها وهي عمرها 9 أشهر، وهذه وتشير إلى يارا التي لا يعجبها الأمر فتبدأ بلوي لسانها كان عمرها 3 سنوات. لا يرسل لي سوى $200، من أين لي أن أعيلهما؟ تجفف عرقها بحركة دائرية ثم تعدل من ثنية الإشار بالرمادي المربوط على الطريقة الشامية ليظهر خصلات شعرها المحنى. تحب تقرأ حازم؟ نكمل بعدين إذا ممكن.
My own first-hand memories belong to another, completely different time. In those days, I slept in my aunt's living room on a sofa bed I shared with Yara. To watch Ra'fat al-Hajjan on the Jordanian state television channel, I would sneak a look through a rip in the blanket, one that grew wider every day thanks to my little fingers. More often than not, I'd eventually feel my aunt's flying slipper hit my head. Then I would sulk to the far side of the sofa, picking up where I'd left off, scraping the cracked paint on the wall. That's when I'd start my nightly struggle with Yara's foot. From the other side of the sofa, she would kick at my tummy, usually by mistake, sometimes on purpose. I couldn't fall asleep if I was hungry, and I couldn't exactly ask my aunt for more food. When she did feed me, it was most often a quarter of a loaf of bread and a tomato, but only if she decided that I was indeed actually hungry. She was usually of the opinion that I was not. In those days, my father was a voice, arriving from Spain by telephone. He called almost every month, and his calls turned the mood in the house upside down. If he didn't call when he was supposed to, my aunt would turn unbearably volatile. If several days passed without the awaited phone call, she would haul us to the PLO offices in Jabal Hussein. We would get into the shared taxi and she'd put me on her lap to avoid paying for the additional seat. There would always be a fight with the driver over the 8 piastres she'd have to pay for Yara, at which point we'd continue the journey on foot as she cursed our father and the driver and the day she was brought into this world and everything else. We'd reach the Munazzam's office and the bald man standing guard at the door would ask, "What, Abu Sa'id hasn't called?" She'd retell the same story, then ask about a man called Abu Hol, who was usually not in that day. She'd then drag us in to see the other man, the one they call Abu Ainain, tall and dark with a head full of thick gray hair. Abu Ainain would greet us warmly and tell us, like every other time, how he was a friend of our dad's from the Beirut days and how he knew our mother and us from when we lived in Hamra. Then he'd remind Yara how he used to drive her to the Rosary Sisters nursery in his car, and she'd scream because she didn't want to go to school. My aunt had little patience for these stories, interrupting him to tell her own, the same one she told to anyone and everyone she'd met for the first or 100th time. "This one," she'd say, pointing at me, "I have raised since she was 9 months old. That one," now pointing to Yara, who'd curl her tongue when she was upset, "was 3 years old. He sends me only $200. How am I supposed to take care of them with that?" She would dry her sweat, moving her hand in a circle around her face, and then adjust the gray headscarf she tied in the Damascene way to display the front strands of her hennaed hair. I would look at her from my perch on the chair. Oh, that's where we stopped. So that was the passage that Maya read out.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to hear you both read, especially after spending so long with the words on the page. It's really beautiful. I guess our next feature is we have some wonderful other voices to join. And I know not everyone, some of us joined at different times. So for those of you who have kindly agreed to chime in, maybe we'll go in the order of Minxi, Francisca, Eman, Masoud, and then Nadirah. Minxi, would you like to start us off? Thank you so much.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Minxi. I'm a writer and a translator from Malaysia, but I'm also a friend of Hazem's, ex-student at NYU. And I had the great privilege to be able to read this book when it was still in its earliest manuscript form. And it's just it's so amazing to see it come to fruition now and be able to be shared with people. I remember when I first read the manuscript, I was like, this is one of the most powerful pieces of fiction I've read. And to this day, it continues to be so. And when I was reading the book again, it's been a couple of years because it's been now 4 years since this project kind of was announced for publication. But I was struck by how much I remembered and retained throughout all that time, because it just is so impactful and it's so powerful. So congratulations to Maya and to Hazem for this amazing piece of art. And yeah, I think everyone, in this call, if you've not read it yet, I think it's going to be an amazing experience. But I did want to share a passage from the book that for me, I just think it really encapsulates everything that's amazing about the book. So should I just read it? I'll just go for it. He steels himself to speak, the words crowding behind a bottleneck inside him, clamoring to gush forth. Listen, boy, you're as inconsequential as a puddle, and I haven't forgotten how your legs trembled in fear and you couldn't fight like a man in Lebanon. And now you want to play the macho man and give out missions and have a coterie of sycophants around you. Not at the expense of the work and the money we send to the families of martyrs and prisoners. In the instant he rehearses this righteous tirade, he catches a glimpse of the girl's reflection in the mirror behind the boss's desk. She is looking right at him, she, the sorceress, who could shatter the mirror right now and blow it up into 100 fragments, one of which might shoot through the director's neck and obliterate him. But her eyebrows are raised as she peers into his eyes. She orders him in a language no one but he could comprehend. Don't. And just to give a bit of context, I guess this passage is a scene where one of the main like male characters, he has like gone into the office. He's like a PL like kind of officer, and he's gone into the office and he's brought his two daughters with him. And it's, to me, you know, it really does encapsulate everything that's so amazing about this book. Like, first of all, the breathtaking language. Like, I can't read Arabic myself, but like it, you know, in just this translation, like I feel like, you know, you can really see this kind of raw beauty and like brutality of the language in of itself. And that's, you know, it's amazing to read. But I think there's also so much kind of like thematic content that comes through, and you see all these interlocking layers of violence and power kind of interacting with each other on the level of like, you know, you have the patriarchy, and you have like how that affects relationships between men and women, between fathers and daughters, parents and children. But you also see the violence of the occupation and of the resistance to the occupation, and, you know, the like living this military life, and also the violence of like life in exile. And there's just all of these interlocking layers that are just coming together in this one paragraph, which I think is amazing for a writer to be able to do. And the whole book is really like that. Like, it just, you know, covers everything. And yeah, I'll just say one last thing, which is like, for me as well, you know, with like what's happening in Gaza right now, as someone who's not Palestinian, but who obviously is very invested in, you know, Palestinian liberation, and believes that we should all be fighting for it. I think that right now, you know, there's like a lot of eyes on Gaza and on the direct, overt, you know, horrible spectacle of violence that we're seeing, and that the Israelis are putting on, I think, for, you know, their purposes. But I think this book is a really powerful reminder that violence has a very long life that exists long after the, you know, these kind of moments that we see. And it kind of extends beyond that to things we don't see as well. So I think that's just a very powerful reminder for all of us that, you know, the fight goes on even if the cameras turn off. So that's all. Thank you. I hope I didn't go on for too long. Sorry.
Not at all. Minxi, thank you so much, truly. Next up, if you're ready, Francisca.
Hi. Thank you. First of all, Hazem, for inviting me to speak and have the opportunity to thank Maya, because this is just such an incredible work, and has spoken to me on so many different levels. Hazem, we first met where we are ex-colleagues, and we first met when Hazem was stuck in Canada due to visa issues, and connected over the fact that I'm a second generation Chilean. My parents are political exiles from Chile. I just wanted to kind of say that my name, which Hazem thanks me as Francisca Fuentes in the book, it missed my mother's name, which isn't his fault. I didn't use it for a very long time because when my father registered me in the UK, he didn't speak English, and he didn't know how to get me to understand that my mother's name needs to be on there. And it wasn't until my mid-30s that I was able to get Chilean citizenship. The children of Chileans in exile weren't allowed citizenship. And only at that point could I add my mother's name. And I think it kind of, the reason that I raise this is because it kind of speaks very directly to the stories that are happening in here, very much from women's perspectives, multi-generational, what it means to carry other women's stories, and to relate as women in these very fragmented spaces and fragmented time periods as well. And that is something that is definitely an experience that I relate to, even though obviously contextually it's incredibly different to the Palestine experience, but there are those similarities, which I think is a conversation that Hazem and I have been having over several years since we met. In terms of the novel itself, firstly, it's a slim little thing and it contains so much. And it uses language in such a tight economic way that is both incredibly generous and incredibly efficient. And I read it in 2021 in the middle of a pandemic, and when I had a young child as well, reading it on my mobile phone. And I absolutely ploughed through it. It was a matter of days in my sleepless period. And I'm very grateful to Hilary and CSU for making it into this beautiful physical work that I can now actually hold and reread. And revisiting it has just reminded me of how much richness there is in it and how many different layers can be brought out upon rereading and rereading again. But also how funny it is, and this kind of sense of it's a very sensory experience reading it. It's visual, but also incredibly tactile. And I think this is perhaps what really interests me the most, is how female bodies move in space, private spaces and public spaces, even though those public spaces are often very restricted. But also how those bodies move across time. So reading it from having a 2-year-old to a 5-year-old when I'm actually sleeping again was also, for me, a very different experience. And I can only encourage everyone else to get invested in this work. I'm going to read. I really struggled to find a passage. Have I got enough time to read a short passage? But the character that I think is my favourite, I've got 2 favourite characters, Malika and also Shireen. Malika's hilarious. I adore her. And I'm going to read the opening. It was between that and the closing paragraph, and I don't feel like I can read the closing paragraph because there may be people who haven't read it, but it's well worth the wait for that closing paragraph. Malika, the midwife of East Jerusalem, dies. I scrub her with cheap wine. I scrub every part of her, but I can't close her half-shut eyes or stop her glance wandering off to something else. She still wants to see everything, to make sure everyone is where they're meant to be, doing what they ought to be doing. We try to do what she would have done in our place. We try and we fail. No one can be on top of everything like she always was. If she knew she'd be in the freezer until Monday, she'd have thrown a fit and done everything in her power to prevent it. No one is thinking about that now. Everyone is busy with the preparations. We try not to think about how it is Malika herself that we're clothing with the white socks and satin chemise she would have bought, especially for a day like today. Her body, shriveled and dehydrated, is heavy now. The 3 of us try to lift her, but we can't. I try not to look at her private parts, but the few little hairlets sprouting there catch my eye. Her face yellowed on the left side from exsanguination, red blotches on her forearm, 2 pale breasts floundering right and left. Everything dead for a while now and resisting. I think that summarises so much of the novel. And like I said, that sensory experience, the embodiedness, and Malika particularly as this character that inhabits both birth and death. I'll hand it back to you, Hilary.
Thank you so much. It's so it's really moving to hear the reading in everyone's voices. I just really appreciate that. And I also was thinking, for those of you who are also in the world of making books, there's this kind of magical moment that happens when a book comes out. It's like you've read it many, many times. You've read it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Maybe you wrote it yourself, and then it's new again. And it's this gift that suddenly is given back to you in the moment that it's kind of given to the world. And I don't quite know how to explain that, but that's it's I guess it's just a beautiful experience I'm having that I wanted to share with you all. Because no matter how well you know the book, it's new again. And I want to echo too, Francisca, saying that this is a short novel that has so many angles and so much to offer, kind of endlessly. Eman, if you're ready, if you might like to come in, and also to thank you as well for your beautiful blurb and recommendation of the book that's on the book itself.
Thank you so much for having me. And Maya, nice to meet you. Yeah, and it's great to be here. And I apologize for having to join late. I'm, of course, between 6,000 meetings, as all of us live between meetings these days. But yeah, I just wanted to echo that this was such a beautiful read for me. I also, like Francisca, like read it so quickly and really swallowed it up, and it really stayed in my heart. For weeks later, and I find myself thinking about it. And I think for me, what was really important about the novel is how uncompromising it is in its complexity. That it sort of refuses to create simple narratives. And I think as someone whose own childhood was very much transient and very much moving back and forth between relatives, and this feeling of not knowing if you're fully who wants you and who doesn't, and sort of like, and feeling kind of like you're falling between the cracks of these adults' lives. That really resonated for me. And I think that the book does such an incredible job of entering the psychic world of a child that's going through that, and taking us there. And so the passage that I wanted to read is just a paragraph on page 25. Where, because it really struck me when I read it. I had to like sit down and just kind of put the book down for a day when I read this passage, because it reminded me so much of my own childhood. But it goes, "This is how I began to amass secrets, adding more whenever I could. For 7 hours a day, I diligently circled the rug in the back room under the pretense that I was doing my homework or memorizing poems. In my circling, I met my mother hundreds of times. I would cry, she would cry, everyone would cry, all from the emotional immensity of the encounter, in which a moment lasted for hours. Then I'd move on, imagining new scenes, the death of my aunt's husband, or my escape with Yara, or the death of my aunt and our dramatic tribulations at the orphanage where we'd end up. When I learned to write, I began to record my thoughts. My secrets, now materialized, had to be preserved in a different way. They were no longer mine alone. They could be taken. I could be held to account. My secrets were now dangerous." Yeah, so thank you so much for this beautiful passage. It's so rare that I see myself so clearly in the character and the characters' lives. And I think, for me as a child, growing up in a tumultuous environment, that was, the amassing of secrets, the rich inner life, and even taking up writing, all really resonated for me. So thank you so much for sharing this with us and with the world, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Eman. And I agree about that passage, that to capture that dreaminess of childhood is so special, and feels almost invasive if you've ever been a child. I think, is Masoud, are you ready?
Hi.
Hi.
You can hear me, right? Okay. First of all, I would like to, like Maya, thank you. This book is amazing. Um, it feels very like such an important work, and I think that like everyone should read it. And I like as soon as I started reading it, I finished it, and I read the book in Arabic and in English. And to be honest, Kaman Hazem, like he did an amazing job. The translation is spot on. But like, yeah, it's the story itself is really intense, to be honest. Also, I like lived in Amman from like a Palestinian family. I was born in a refugee camp, then went and lived like on an outskirts of Wahdat camp. And when like the second chapter of Amman was really like when I was reading it, this time I felt something like very intense, and I'd like to share a passage, but before I also grew up with like a father who was always away. So my mother and my grandfather, like my maternal grandfather, were kind of my family. So when I read something about like me anticipating my grandfather and him bringing like a sweet every time, it felt really like important, and so it felt really. Yeah, and like also complaining about like every month, where's the money, like, but yeah. So I'd like to read this passage. I cannot turn my father's voice into features. He is a man made of sound. I'm supposed to be very polite and formal when I speak to him, but I have to call him Baba. It's confusing because my aunt's husband is Baba as well. After all, he does all the things that fathers do. He brings me cream-filled biscuits from the candy factory where he works. Every evening at 7, I wait for him to get home, looking out the window in the small door. When he appears, I watch him descend the hill across from the house, his hand behind his hunched back, wearing khakis in the summer or military fatigues and a black and white kufiya on colder days. As soon as I spot him, I zero in on his hands, waiting for the moment he'll use them to keep his balance as he navigates the steeper and more slippery stretches. I'm so excited to see what he's brought me, sorry. One time it's a telephone that becomes a car you drag by the handset. Another time it's a handbag, and yet another a doll that yelps wah when flipped on its belly. At night, he puts me on his lap and leaves me to play with the holes in his white undershirt, which I diligently widen as he repeats his classic question, "Should I get you a small dearie dear?" To which I give my classic response, "Yes, Baba." I think I like also like the one after it where he makes that food, like, because I always remember my grandfather had like a beehive. He would bring always like bee with some honey with him, and it was like this fight that him and my mother would have when he consumes more olive oil. Although he's the one that brings the olive oil, but still, like, it's زيت السنة مش زيت السنة الماضية, so it's something. It's so yeah, thank you so much. Really, I enjoy every detail of the book, and it's really important to talk about the Fidaiyin part and that history, because it's something that I don't think lots of people know about, and we experienced and we know about. So yeah, it's I don't know how to like how to translate that in Arabic. So maybe Hazem can say that. يعني instant translation مش يعني مش ايدينك اصابع ايدينك مش نفس بعض. So I don't know how to translate that into English. So it makes me realize that أصابع ايدينك مش زي بعض. يعني you have stuff. Thank you so much, and please read the book. Salam.
Thank you. And Nadirah, I think you might be our last guest speaker if you're ready. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nadirah. Thank you to all of you, to Hilary, and then also most of all to Maya for writing the book and to Hazem for translating it. I read it for the first time this week and in translation, so inshallah I get to see the Arabi soon. I really did find myself thinking as I read it, what Hazem wrote in the afterword, which was, we need more books that are for us. We need more films that are for us. We need spaces where we can talk about these issues, because we can't talk about masculinity in the way that people have been forcing the conversation, which has produced the dehumanization of Palestinians. And, I think all of us who've seen the images out of Jabalia last night, out of Khayyam al-Shati this morning, are always turning these issues over and over and over in our heads. And I also think that something I appreciated about the book, even though these moments kind of come in and out, is the way that this book discusses our dispersal in a way that doesn't explain to a non-Palestinian reader, you have to learn this history as you go along and kind of absorb it as you go along. And it's something we know really, really, really well. But the other thing I loved about it were these moments where you explain kind of, you depict so well, Maya, like what it's like to be in a place that's strange, but is in like the Arabic speaking world, and you're trying to understand how the people around you are behaving and like your little bubble. And when Hazem asked me to do this morning, I said, oh, of course, I want to read about fish. So, because like we all have to learn all this stuff as we move to different places, and it can be a lot. And also, I think a big thing that I'm thinking about is how do we talk about food when our people are starving, when this is a famine that is being produced by this colonial force. And this, I thought, this little passage, which is by one of the main male characters, after he, and this is a bit of a content warning, hits his child, I think encapsulates kind of why and how to talk about food in these moments, and how it can turn into a vehicle to talk about ghurba and all of these other deeply Palestinian feelings and experiences. So I'll start. He is also happy. It pains him that he beat Yara over nothing more than some bangs, and now he feels as if he is doing a great deed in making the girls happy, proving to himself that he is indeed the super dad who has sacrificed all for his daughter's upbringing, who has not married for the past 15 years for their sake. To further prove the point, after they go to the salon, he takes them to the Lebanese restaurant and treats them to a sumptuous breakfast of Arabic bread, mashed fool, hummus, and falafel. And for context, this is taking place in Tunisia. Go on. No one really knows what Tunisians have for breakfast. The reigning theory is that they eat baguettes stuffed with fish, stuffed with poached eggs, a theory bolstered by the twin facts that they eat fish at all hours and know nothing of hummus, labana, or falafel. It's all rather strange. Yeah, it's just such a perfect little moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Nadirah. Thank you to all of our guests. Sorry, very moving to hear from everyone. We have a little time to chat. If you would like to ask a question, Maya and Hazem, I feel like I have questions for you. Maybe you have questions for each other that you, I don't know, are wanting to talk about. And also there's like, for folks on the call, I think you can raise your hand and I can just pop you in if you want to hop in and say something or ask a question, or you can put it in this little Zoom feature. But maybe I'll start, if that's okay, just with a little.
I just want to add something. Yeah. First of all, it's so moving to hear this paragraph by but all of you, because it's my favorites. All of them are my favorites, and at the same time, it's like when Muhammad and Eman and Nadirah, especially because they know the context, you know. And I always say that this novel is very local, and it was very hard for it to be published in English because it's very local, and it's for us to hear our stories, to hear ourselves, because most of the literature is like written for foreigners, for others. We don't need this. Palestinians need to hear each other, to hear, to hold their pains and talk about it and be loud of it. And the foreigners don't understand what we are talking about when we are talking about the falafel or matam Lebanese, like it's so far, or like these small things, nobody understands it. Like for Muhammad, he understands what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Jabal Hussein, we talk about these little things, small details that has a huge history in our memories. And this is because we are the second generation of that generation, of the generation of the defeated one, that the PLO fighters who were in Lebanon, and they were like the fighters, and then they had to sit in offices and become only employees and doing nothing, but at the same time they're supposed to be the fidaiyin, yani. So we had to live with this in Tunis, in other countries. And after that, when Oslo come and we all return to Palestine, it's their return, it's not our return. So who we are as people, yani. I don't want to talk about this novel as identity or looking for identity, because everybody in Arabic likes just talking about it in this from this perspective. It's not about searching for my identity. It's like, I don't know what it is, but it's not about that. It's because I know who I am, but at the same time, it's the whole context that doesn't know what it is. You know, it's never ended. It's still continue, and we are still figure out who we are in this context. Yeah, that's it. This is what I just wanted to add. I'm very moved. I want to cry. No. Thank you all for making this. This novel has lots of. It was very strong, and the publishing it in Arabic was very bad experience for me, because I had a lot of problem with because of this novel. I stopped reading it for 10 years because it was scary. It was scary. It's not something easy to talk about or to write about. And as Jumana said at the text, when things are written, it's somebody will come after you because of it. So to write your own testimony like this kind of story it wasn't easy. So I had to escape from it. I had to stop thinking about it. I blocked it from my whole life, but now after 10 years, we are reading it again. We are loving it again. So I'm very moved, and thanks to Hilary and of course Hazem. Yani it's a whole new text for me. It's not the same.
Oh, thank you so much. I was going to ask you kind of about, that phenomenon, like having a novel come back to you a decade later, which you've just spoken, like what it's like to have it reappear, which you've just spoken to. I wonder, I'd love to open it up if there's, I always come with a million questions, so I can throw them at people, but if there's anyone who would like to say something or ask a question of Hazem or Maya, please feel welcome.
While people ask, I want to say one of the early things that confirmed for me that this was something I really wanted to amplify. Because I felt also that if it's if it becomes something people talk about in English, then maybe Arabic readers will want to go read the Arabic also, more than read it in the first print that came out in 2013. Was Maya sent me book reviews that had been published in Arabic about the Arabic book. And I was a little bit, I don't know, I was like half shocked, half not shocked, that it felt like most of the people reviewing the book didn't understand the book. I think at least one review, maybe two of not that many reviews, that were shared with me that I found, talked about it like it was somehow about the Palestinian resistance, that it was kind of yet another text saying rah rah, PLO and the Fidaiyin, and there's this phenomenon of like as soon as something gets called Palestinian, then immediately it's like you already know what it is, what it's going to be. You don't need to read it. You don't need to watch the play. And I see it over and over and over again when people write reviews of kind of Palestinian artwork and stuff. It's kind of just like framed in that. But this book is a major critique of the kind of not culture of resistance in the sense of people refusing to be defeated, but culture of resistance that glorifies a certain kind of masculinity and makes it a kind of like normative and normalized kind of masculinity that says that what you do behind closed doors doesn't matter. What matters is that you wear a military uniform or go to a PLO office every day or whatnot. And I think one of the things that's sort of come up also in things people have said and that Maya reiterated also, and that I think Eman said quite clearly, was one of the major issues we have as Palestinians is that because of the ways that colonialism has fragmented us, colonialism and this kind of like modern nation-state border regime, is that each of us only sees a very particular bubble or set of bubbles of what it is, what the Palestinian experience is. And those bubbles are shrinking and they're being forced to shrink. If people don't know, Jabalia, which has come up in this conversation 2 or 3 times so far, is a kind of part of Gaza City that also has a refugee camp. And over the last month, nothing has come into the camp. No food, of course, no electricity or water, no medicine. And the camp has spent the people of the camp have spent the last 8 to 10 days completely besieged. Anybody leaving the camp has been shot or killed. And there's bombing, quadcopters being sent in to kill people and so on. It's just an extermination in front of our eyes, and we're all watching it. But this is kind of we're all basically on a timeline towards that. The way that the Israeli project works is about not just denying our existence, but eliminating our existence. And it has been from day one. And the tactic and strategy they've used for that is to close us off from one another, is to kind of put, ideally down to the last individual kind of just squeezed in and not able to communicate, not able to see the world through one another's eyes. And one of the many things that made this book so urgent, and I think will remain urgent, and it was urgent when it was written, and it was urgent 20 years before it was written, is a lot of our cultural production comes from a perspective of one bubble. And it feels alien to the rest of us to see. Most of the Palestinian cinema, so if we go to a Palestine Film Festival, most of the films you'll see come from effectively the same kind of bubble. It's mostly actually Palestinians in 1948 occupied Palestine who are the big filmmakers and whose films get watched. And they don't even make films about their own reality. They make a film about their imagined reality of life under occupation in the West Bank. So it's this really powerful part that Eman highlighted in the book, is that it actually, Maya's life took her to different places where she was also able to share something about what does it mean to be a Palestinian in Jordan? What does it mean to be a Palestinian in Tunis? What does it mean to be a Palestinian in Jerusalem or in the West Bank? And not as a what is our identity, but as a almost kind of like what is that? What does it mean to be in this kind of setting? And I think the more we're able to kind of convey what it looks like from our bubble and be able to also kind of like think the political, the social, the cultural, but have these different experiences in mind, is what enables us to be Palestinian. Because otherwise, we're just in the ghetto. We're just surrounded in the ghetto and in the ghettoization that the colonial power has imposed on us. So yeah, and so just I don't think I've ever actually thanked you, Maya, for writing this book. Here's my chance. Thank you for writing this book.
I see there's like a few people. Maybe Phil, I don't know. I'm just gonna smash this if you want to come ask with your human voice.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Maya, thank you so much. I can't wait to read this novel. Thank you, Hazem, for translating it. You came to speak to my class a year ago to talk about your poems, which I find so compelling and so lovely. And, really kind of mining that space that's not really talked too much about, bringing us into in Palestinian experience in all these ways, not only in diaspora but also in under occupation. And I just wanted to ask you how do you see your work in conversation with sort of the classics of Palestinian women writers like Fadwa Tuqan and Sahar Khalifa, and of course, Adania Shibli now. So I'm just curious, did you gain any inspiration from them? Do you see yourself in conversation with their work in any way? Thank you.
Yes, of course. I think yani, I'm part of this women writers who like Fadwa Tuqan. I think her voice was very strong, especially in novels, and her writing her own life story more than poetry. For example, I like her النثر يعني more. Also like عدنية شبلي. They all their strength was about talking about their stories as it is, not making it beautiful, not making it heroic or something. It was writing about their stories as it is, and it is very strong. And I think this is what we need, because Palestinian literature is very masculine, and it's all about political big issues, not about the small stories, the small details, the life. And I always say that as a woman, like men go to the war, and women like cleaning the blood from the clothes. And I think what literature is about this life. We can read about the Palestinian history in books and press and journalism, but we need the real stories. We will read it in literature, and I think women did write and is writing the text of Palestinian literature away from being strong or being heroes.
Thank you, Phil and Maya. I saw Frida maybe had a question, but I don't know. I know we're like at 1, if we have a few more minutes. I don't know, Frida, if you still would like to ask, I'll invite you in if you'd like.
Yes, am I unmuted now?
You are perfect. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Yeah, well, this is the second time I read the book. I read it before when it was still maybe in the draft translation. This time it's kind of the second time I struggled through the reading until I realized that this is we really need now. Yeah, a story where everybody is the anti-hero, I thought. And maybe the passage that I think, sorry, I forgot the name of the first one of the people who commented, where the father of Said marches into the office, and this is a caricature to me. This is it felt kind of, this is how maybe the fighter who has been sorry to use this big word, emasculated. You know, he has the fight in his head, but of course, once he enters the office, it's gone. And then he kind of wants to show that he's the man by maybe abusing his daughters, the weaker people. And this is sad about the Palestinians and many other people in our part of the world, where yeah, people lose their humanity because of the oppression, not oppression, let's say, because of their feeling of being helpless, like we are now watching what's happening in Palestine. Yeah, this is very timely, I would say, now that this book is out. Again, we're helpless, watching, very little that we can do, except, I don't know, just worry. And maybe, I'm talking a lot. If I want to go back and visit a chapter, it would be maybe the Amal's chapter, where she runs through the camp after the massacre. And yeah, so I had other ideas, but now they're out of my head. Yeah, so this is really a very powerful work. If we read it with the sense that this is not, we're not romanticizing the struggle. This is a reality, and yeah, it is very, very powerful if you approach it that way, without thinking that yes, the Fida'is, the fighters are heroes. They are human, like the rest of us, and they have been deprived of their ability to fight. And that's it.
Maya and Hazem, if we can take 5 more minutes, maybe we have one more question, and then I know we're a little bit over, but Luis, I'll invite you in.
Hello, everybody. For Maya, my question is, well, first of all, thank you for writing this amazing novel. And then for the little that I know of your biography, I feel this book has a bit of autobiography. Could you quantify how much you took from your personal or community experience to create this experience, this book? Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Yes, of course. It's like it's almost like my journey in life, like born in Beirut, moving to Jordan, and then to Tunis, and then to Palestine, and now living in Jerusalem. It's the journey of my life, of course, but it's also for me, it was like as a writer, it's like I had everything to as a material for my story. It was there to talk about the whole Palestinian experience in diaspora, in camps, in Jerusalem, and also not. I didn't mean, I had to say it. I didn't mean to say that the Fidayeen is bad or good. And as Farida said, I wanted to say that to picture the Palestinians as they are, as human, as people who also as victims of their story, of their own existence in that time and period of life, and they don't know how to deal with this, and this is how they deal with it. And so yeah, and I had to say something when I read the novel now after like 10 years. The most powerful part was, which made me cry, was the Amal story, as Farida was talking about. And that part actually was totally, it wasn't related to any story that happened in my life, in the real life. It was totally imagined. I knew nothing about Amal's life because I don't know her. And she was totally invented. And it was the most powerful part for me when I read it again now. I don't know why. Maybe because I was doing a lot of research when I did this part, talking about the massacre and Lebanon's life, and I knew a little bit about the relationship between Palestinian and Lebanese, and had to invent a lot, and this hate and love relationship between both sides, that they love each other but they hate each other, they want to kill each other, but at the same time they feel bad for each other, they compassion. So this part was invented, and but it was, for me now, it was the most powerful part. Maybe I don't know why, but yeah, it's part of it. It's my story, but a lot of it, it's like I've taken it to another level. It was a lot of it is going to imaginary, how it will be if that happened, how it will be if she killed him, how it will be if the reality wasn't the same. So I played with this a lot, but of course that make a lot of problem for me at the end. But it worked a little bit. It worked.
I think too, for those who haven't read it, I'll just say like the ending of that chapter also, I think it's among the most powerful in the novel. Just like little seeds toward spoilers. Maya and Hazem, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I don't know if there's any last things you'd like to say, please feel welcome.
Hazem,
just that I'm grateful to everyone who joined today, and grateful for the people who shared passages and shared questions and shared comments. Hilary, it was really, really, I mean, I say this in the afterward, but it really was a pleasure to work with you on this. And Maya, I guess we're together till the end. So yeah, I look forward to our future together. Yeah.
I just want to mention at the end that the story of this translation, it was like, I think Hazem sent me, I don't know if it was message or email 10 years ago. It was
in English.
It was message or email?
Email,
yeah. We didn't know each other, and he says, I love this novel, I want to translate it, and I said yes, and it was like this. And then he had a whole story in his own life, and we had a long journey of searching for a publisher, and it was really hard. And then finally we have it now. At this point, it's strange, but at the same time, I think it's important in a way, to come now. Yeah. Thank you, Hazem.
Thanks so much to you both, and to Minxi and Francisca and Eman and Masoud and Nadirah too, for joining. I will let us all go because I know we're like whatever time I thought it was ending. I think it's a different time than that. I'll send a little email to folks so that everyone has information about the book if you want to share it. And I'm just so grateful for everyone's presence and for coming today. Thank you.